that was a normal day for me, right? It was every day was that for me. When you're up here every single day and that stops, which, everything comes to an end at some point, then what?
I want to just take a picture.
Studio One was around for almost 20 years, from 1974 to 1993. And it was just an opportunity to kind of tell the story of those 2 decades and everything that happened. From 1974, it was the beginning of the LGBT gay rights movement, the excitement of it. And then, of course, the 80s, when people started dying everywhere and the AIDS crisis. And it sort of became ground zero for AIDS organizations fundraising. The very first fundraiser was with Joan Rivers hosting, and Melissa, her daughter, is part of our film. And they got death threats, so it's really easy to forget, even if you live through it, the way things were for LGBTQ people. And for the younger generation, they really have no idea the way things were. And so hopefully it will reach some of the younger people and show them just the struggle that so many people had and so many people died to have the rights that are essentially taken for granted. And the fact that it took so many years to get this film finished, I had no idea it would take quite this long. But the fact that it's coming out right now in this moment, a political moment, is really important because, everything could go backwards. Everything could be taken away. It's very fragile, those rights.
The challenges was finding footage. At that time, nobody had cell phones. By the grace of God and Goddess, we were able to hook up with Natalie Garcia, who's in the film, who happened to have found by random across the street from her apartment building a garage that was opened up, and there were boxes and boxes of old photos marked Studio One. Someone who had lived there had saved thousands of photos. I found all these boxes of men without shirts and dancing, and it looks like they were having a wonderful time. She said, it said Studio One, and I went, Studio One? I said, I'm working on that documentary. Photos and photos and photos. She's got zillions, so that's filmmaking. You never know what's going to happen, especially with documentaries.
I am the last owner of Studio One. There were 5 partners, and I'm the last one. All the other ones have, they passed. So,
When somebody mentions Studio One, what goes into your mind immediately?
The club. That club was so fabulous, and we didn't expect it. We kind of knew what we were doing. We knew we were building a big discotheque. We had no idea that it would have the effect on the population that it did. When the Ambassador Coconut Grove closed, all the Hollywood folk, they had nowhere to go. So this place opened, and it was called The Factory. And at the time, it was owned by Anthony Newley and Joan Collins. They were a couple. I want to say Rosalind Russell. Some of the big names of that era owned this thing called The Factory. It was a dinner and dancing and hangout. And when I used to go, I had an agent because I used to do some acting in those days. So he used to have me go up and sit at the bar. You had to be a member. So he'd give me his card. He said, go sit at the bar. Now, I by no means thought I was ever going to be discovered sitting in that bar. But Scott walked in one day. Scott Forbes, our managing partner. He says, Michael, what are you doing here? I said, I don't know. My agent tells me to come up and sit here. I don't know. And so I would sit and nurse a drink. So he said, well, hey, take a walk with me. So the very genesis of Studio One was right there that night, because Scott said to me, I'm thinking about doing a gay night once a month on a Friday. I can get it. Factory was losing its popularity, wasn't the same as it was when it first opened. So he said, let's do what do you think about that? I said, I think that'd be great. So from the very beginning, I was sort of in this, I was there. I saw it. I saw what he saw.
There's a lot going on in that film, right? And it's a microcosm of what life was back then, right? And history is repeating itself. We've talked about that a lot in relationship to current. We started filming it and COVID hit. So, it's a little different than AIDS, but in a sense, it's the same thing. For me, because I was there 6 or 7 days a week for 10 years, I have that's the point of view that I bring, because that was what we saw in the film. That was a normal day for me, right? It was every day was that for me. So, my challenges, which I share in the film, were about coming out of that, right? Like when you're up here every single day and that stops, which, everything comes to an end at some point, then what? And so the piece that really comes out was, how do you process thousands of people that you've lost? I couldn't keep up. I just couldn't keep up with it, We don't talk about all of that, but 4, 5, 6 funerals every weekend, so that's another piece of it that, I kind of put to the side, and at some point the film is really cathartic. It's helping to heal a lot of people that come to see it. They see the faces, go into the memories, and that's really, really important as well.
Dr. Michael Koth, who's a preeminent AIDS doctor in the 1980s and 90s, knows Marc Saltarelli, our director, and they were putting the film together, and they felt that there were people that I knew that had been involved in and around Studio One that I might be able to reach out to and start piecing together. And my great fortune was one of those people was Cheetah Rivera. And I called Cheetah and said, I know that you opened the back lot, which was the cabaret behind Studio One. Would you do some interviews and talk about your experience of opening that room? And she did, and then I was invited into post-production and editing and all the things that I learned how to do when I was working at the studios, and getting to tell an incredibly important story.
I started going to Studio One in the mid-'70s when I was underage with a fake ID. So I have a very long history with the club. And I never realized that the guys that I was meeting back then in the 70s would become the activists to take on the AIDS epidemic and lead me into a life of politics. Like, I never would have run for city council and been elected 5 times if I hadn't shown up at that bar, age 16 with my fake ID, and get all those relationships started. So, yeah.
What is the biggest thing that you remember from that time?
Back in the 70s, to be there, to see Sylvester perform live, to see Divine sing and perform live, the Village People. I mean, it was this whole different period of time in American culture where the gay community was just being born. We just came out of the sexual revolution, and all of a sudden we're kind of out creating our own culture.
Back in the 80s, for 5 years, we produced all the entertainment at the back lot. It was a pretty wild time. It was our dream of being major producers back then. That's what we wanted to do. We wanted to produce television. We wanted to produce film. We wanted to do all of that. Okay, well, it maybe took a little bit longer than we thought.
It's where all the famous people coming up, they went there to be seen, to do open mic night, to do their first show.
And they were coming to you.
They were auditioning for us. And they've all become famous.
Yeah, they're all famous, but they would audition for us every Monday night to try and get into our shows.
Oh, yeah. No, you didn't know who you're going to see there. If the paparazzi understood back then what was going on in studio with the stars who came up just to dance, they got, gay people are cool. They aren't going to run up, oh, can I have your autograph? If you're dancing there, I don't care how mega a star you're going to be treated with deference just like anybody else. And they loved it.
At this time when human rights are once again at stake, to remind people that fighting and continuing to fight does pay off, is something that I believe the arts can do. I'm in the film business. It's how I can communicate. And I think that this film stands as a testament to people that are willing to rise up for human well-being and human rights.